The global risk environment just witnessed a strategic paradox. The U.S. is accelerating a 90% peace agreement in Eastern Europe while simultaneously launching a violent, kinetic military intervention in its own hemisphere.
This is neural pulse. Let's analyze. Okay, let's just dive right into that opening shockwave. This pivot to the Americas is no longer just a theory.
No, it's a boots-on-the-ground reality, and it hit before dawn on January 3rd.
So walk us through it. What precisely happened in Venezuela that has so violently reset the risk landscape for 2026?
What really stands out to me is the sheer audacity of the action. This was not some limited strike. It was a decapitation strategy.
Decapitation.
Yes. In the pre-dawn hours of January 3rd, the U.S. initiated Operation Absolute Resolve in Caracas. Our sources point to specialized forces, most likely Delta Force, with major air support.
And they were targeting the absolute top of the regime.
The absolute top. And the seizure was successful within just a few hours.
That fast. The core mission was the capture of Nicolas Maduro and Cilia Flores. They were immediately removed, transferred to the USS Iwo Jima, and are now facing federal prosecution on narco-terrorism charges.
So a regime was, for all practical purposes, just erased in a single morning.
Functionally erased, yes.
So let's talk strategic context. The public line is narco-terrorism, but the market is clearly pricing in something exponentially larger than that.
Well, of course. If we connect the dots, this action is the violent endpoint of what analysts are calling Operation Southern Spear.
A modern Monroe Doctrine.
A modern and very muscular redefinition of it, yes. The real goal here isn't just counter-narcotics. It's about long-term energy security. And critically, it's about eliminating the resource influence that China and Russia had built up.
Billions in loans and resource deals.
Billions. And that's the strategic paradox we opened with. The U.S. executes this massive intervention, basically ignoring international sovereignty.
The debate over that is effectively dead now.
It is. It's a strategy of, as the briefing calls it, power by current situation change. They just moved. They ignored the inevitable UN backlash because securing their own hemisphere became the absolute priority.
And that instability was immediately priced into the energy markets. Give us the absolute linkage here, because the numbers, they're just staggering.
The reaction was, I think, the most dramatic single-day spike we've seen in years. You have to remember, Brent crude was struggling, really struggling.
Right. Weak demand fears. It was trading near, what, $60?
$60.85 just a couple of days before. Then Operation Absolute Resolve hits, and panic just takes over the supply risk models. We saw the price just go vertical.
Hitting an intraday high near $112.50 on January 3rd.
An 85% surge in less than 48 hours.
A shock like that forces a complete recalculation of monetary policy across the globe.
Oh, absolutely. That supply shock leads us directly into the financial reality of a flight to quality and, of course, inflation.
Okay, let's follow that money. The fact sheet details these simultaneous extremes. You've got gold, incredibly stable at a historic high, while oil just flipped from total collapse to extreme panic.
Exactly. Gold is sitting there near $4,338 an ounce. It's just maintaining the sustained high, confirming its status as the institutional safe haven.
Regardless of what the dollar does.
Right. But the divergence is what's critical. We went from oil potentially breaking the $60 floor to, vaulting past $100 because of supply disruption fears.
And this sustained spike in gold, this isn't just retail fear, is it? This feels like a calculated state-level hedge.
Precisely. The context is everything here. Central banks, especially China and Russia, they spent all of 2025 liquidating U.S. T-bills and just aggressively accumulating physical gold.
They were hedging against exactly this kind of risk.
The weaponization of the U.S. dollar. The Venezuela action just proved that the ability of the U.S. Treasury to use sanctions to seize assets is a very, very real danger for any non-Western nation.
Which brings up a really important paradox. Usually surging oil is inflationary, which is bearish for the dollar. But the dollar is holding up. Why is the market buying both the dollar and gold at the same time?
That is the correlation breakdown. Normally one goes up, the other goes down. But this level of geopolitical tension is driving both safe haven dollar buying and safe haven gold buying.
So the market isn't just worried about inflation or recession.
I think it's doubting the fundamental value of fiat currency itself. When the rules of international finance can be broken by one military action, big money rushes to both the safest currency and the oldest store of value.
So what is the immediate macroeconomic fallout? The near doubling of oil can't be absorbed without some severe consequences.
The consequence is immediate. This is the definition of a cost-push shock. It just completely overturns the Fed's plans for rate cuts in 2026.
All those careful scenarios are gone.
Gone. If the core cost of global transportation and manufacturing doubles, inflation expectations just surge again.
Which means the valuation corrections we've seen in equities and real estate, which were based on the expectation of cheaper borrowing, they're suddenly reversed.
Absolutely reversed. The easing cycle is off the table. Q1 2026 will be completely dominated by extreme stagflation concerns.
Extreme.
Because companies will absorb this 85% cost speak. That forces hiring freezes, job cuts, that's the stagnation, while prices keep rising. That's the inflation. Companies will immediately pivot to cash preservation.
So geopolitical risk has officially become an earnings risk.
And this intense focus on South America was only possible because of strategic moves elsewhere, specifically a clear exit strategy in Eastern Europe. This financial shock leads us right to the Eurasian trade-off.
Right. You can't launch Operation Absolute Resolve if you're still bogged down in a complex European ground war.
It hinged entirely on achieving that strategic detachment.
And the fact sheet reports significant progress after the Mar-a-Lago meeting. What's the outcome of the Trump-Zelensky talks?
The announcement is that 90% of a peace plan has been agreed upon. And crucially, it's predicated on Ukraine receiving strong security guarantees, which are still subject to congressional approval.
But that 90% figure, that signals the U.S. has found the off-ramp it needed?
It has. The priority has shifted. These guarantees, they'll almost certainly bypass a formal NATO membership.
So bilateral treaties, maybe a coalition peacekeeping force.
Something like that. The key is to achieve a functional ceasefire that frees up U.S. attention and, more importantly, military resources.
But the paradox of this peace, and it's a huge one, is that it doesn't solve the core rivalry between Russia and the West.
Not at all. It just decentralizes the conflict.
It changes the venue.
Exactly. I mean, peace in Ukraine does not mean better U.S.-Russia relations. Russia is already intensely criticizing the Venezuela action at the UN, calling it a violation of international law. This is a cold peace.
So the Russian military assets, and probably more significantly, mercenary groups like the Africa Corps that were tied up in Ukraine, they're now free to be redirected.
They are already being redirected. We anticipate an accelerated shift of those resources to other global flashpoints, the Sahel, Libya, and specifically to pro-Russian elements throughout South America to cause chaos after the Maduro arrest.
The fight just becomes asymmetrical. And the consequence for Europe, which has relied so heavily on the U.S. defense umbrella, must be profound.
Europe is left holding the bag. A ceasefire is likely in early 2026, yes, but it will be a cold peace funded by European resolve.
They're forced to significantly increase their own defense spending.
Which requires massive sovereign borrowing, and that puts additional unwelcome pressure on their national bonds.
And that shift in resources just highlights existing vulnerabilities everywhere else, specifically the resource nationalism that just flared up in the Sahel.
This decentralization of conflict brings us directly to the emerging resource battles in Africa.
So let's look at the Sahel. The briefing highlights a severe uranium crisis brewing there.
The facts are stark. The military regime in Niger has stripped the French state-owned company Orano of its uranium mining rights.
And they're declaring they'll sell it independently on the open market.
They are, and this is all being backed by the growing military reliance of the Alliance of Sahel states. That's Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso on Russian private military companies.
And this isn't happening in a vacuum. It's a direct reaction to what they perceive as Western military adventurism, which the Venezuela action just poured gasoline on.
Precisely. For the AES nations, the U.S. intervention is a catalyst. It confirms their fear that they could be next. So their strategy is to double down, to deepen their reliance on Russia as a sort of protective fortress.
So what's the outcome for Europe's nuclear energy sector and for global commodity prices?
It's a confirmed cessation of supply from Niger. That's a significant chunk of global production. It spikes uranium prices even further and triggers an immediate aggressive resource scramble toward Canada, Kazakhstan, and Australia.
The Sahel is hardening into an exclusive Russian and Chinese resource hub,
fragmenting the global supply chain even more.
And from the physical battlefield, we have to shift to the invisible one. Our sources confirm a, frankly, chilling vulnerability in U.S. infrastructure.
This is probably the most sobering fact in the briefing. Confirmation from CISA reports that Chinese state-backed hackers, the group known as Typhoon, have successfully pre-positioned deep inside U.S. critical infrastructure.
We're talking power grids, water systems, ports.
Comms networks. And pre-positioned is the key phrase. They aren't just stealing data. Their specialization is operational technology disruption.
Meaning they're not after financial theft, they're sitting dormant inside the actual switches and controls that manage the flow of power or water.
Exactly. And China is using this capability as its ultimate asymmetric deterrent. After a kinetic action like the one in Venezuela, the risk is now significantly higher that we could see. Scattered, unexplained system outages across the U.S.
As warning shots, a non-diplomatic retaliation for the Maduro arrest. So the threat shifts from data loss to a physical, operational shutdown.
And that's the ultimate danger. If the U.S. suffers these kinds of widespread outages, the damage risks being deemed an uninsurable act of war. Geopolitical risk is no longer over there somewhere. It's migrated into the digital layers of our own power supply.
So let's synthesize this. We've covered troops, money, and electrons. What are the three core lessons for our listener as they plan for this new environment?
First, energy volatility is the new normal. The idea of stable, cheap global oil is over. You have to recalculate your cost premises based on frequent, unpredictable, $100-plus spikes.
Second, gold is now the global fear index. With the dollar being used as a weapon, the flight to physical assets isn't just a conservative choice anymore.
Yeah.
For central banks, it's becoming a mandatory survival strategy.
And finally, geopolitical risk is no longer distant. The action in Venezuela is instantly connected to your company's shipping costs, your utility bill, and your corporate cyber liability. The world is fragmented but intensely coupled by risk.
The fantasy of Pax Americana, of stable supply chains, that's gone. The new reality is that a Special Forces raid miles away is now instantly visible in your operational budget. Preparation for this new interconnected risk environment is paramount. Neural Pulse. Clarity in a complex world. See you tomorrow.